Hello, thank you for joining today. You're here with Bill Palifka. You're at the Simonics podcast, and I have my good friend Dave Chrysler with me today. Dave Chrysler is the CEO and co-founder of the Chrysler Club, a consulting firm. And Dave, pleasure to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bill. I'm excited to be on with you today and get into this conversation.
So this is our second podcast. The first one I did with my friend Lisa. We were talking about veteran issues, but today I figure we could talk a little bit about the business world, a little bit about data analytics and analysis and AI also we want to get into a little bit of what you're doing and how you're helping people and what you're just seeing out in the marketplace because I think there's a lot of good information. I know we have these amazing conversations offline all the time, you and I.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dave, why don't you introduce yourself, give a little bit of background of yourself, and then, let's just jump into it.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill. Again, my name is Dave Chrysler, and I own an operations focused boutique consultancy where we work with leaders from both the SMB and SME space and really help them optimize their operations, with the goal of impacting profitability, cash flow, and company culture.
And the thing I always like about you, Dave, right, is that you really are an ops guy, right? You get into the weeds of things, and but you also have to deal with a lot of technology. And I know you like are the guy anti-tech, right? Because where does real work happen?
I certainly wouldn't put myself in the anti-tech bucket, but I think for me, where it really stops is that too often we're looking at tech as that silver bullet, and the reality of it is, tech is a tool. It is what allows the kind of planning people and process to come together to be executed in a way that actually moves the needle for our businesses. I think there's a big distinction. I love technology, always have. There's certainly, a lot of advantages when you've got a tech mature company. But again, too often I see businesses out there saying, hey, we need to replace our ERP, or we need to replace our CRM, or we need this tool or that tool. And the reality is, you start to unpack that, what it really means, what they're trying to say is that our people and process layer is not working well together. We've not clearly defined our process flows. We're not leveraging the expertise of our people, and we're not doing that within our tech stack. Right. So it doesn't mean that there's never a case to be made for, platforms to be upgraded or to be replaced. But what it does mean is that there's a lot of things we can do up until that point. Even with the cool stuff that's being, developed and released today.
And Dave, I think that's why you and I always have these great conversations because, right, we both agree tech for tech is nothing, right?
Yeah.
But tech for a purpose and an outcome, that's a totally different conversation, right? And if tech is an enabler, right, that can help improve your business, you should be doing it all day long, right?
Yes.
And
Yep.
and you're spot on, right? It is about people. It's about your processes. How are you enabling your business? Not about what latest whiz bang technology you put in there. And me as a tech guy, I tend to say, I don't want to feel the tech, right? I just want to do what we need to do to improve our business, get to where we want to go, right?
Yeah.
Dave, as a guy who's out there talking with a lot of customers, helping a lot of our mid-sized businesses, what are you seeing out there from a technology standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it briefly, Bill, but the reality of it is, so many companies, especially in the mid market space, are trying to figure out. It's everybody is talking about AI and ML and how these things are impacting their business, but the reality is, for most businesses, even especially I would say in the mid market, there's no real use case just yet, right? They're still trying to unpack some of the traditional issues that we have when it comes to technology, and therefore, a lot of people are saying, oh well, if we only had, fill in the blank, right? Because we could plug in any kind of platform that we want to talk about. But that's for me where it starts. It's like, I'll give you a great, for instance, something I came across recently. But we're dealing with a company as this a mid-sized manufacturer that's really challenged with their inventory management. And so, again, kind of on the outside looking in, it would be real easy to say, it's something technology related. And the reality of it is it's not. It has nothing to do with their tech stack. Their tech stack is mature. There's no real reason or kind of use case to replace it. But what's missing within that is kind of the underlying integrity, and governance that's required to then be able to do something from an insights perspective, right? So that's where we start to talk about, what kind of tools are out there to pull insights. And we can kind of go down that rabbit hole. The stuff that you guys are doing is amazing, from an infrastructure piece and kind of the ability to take some of the traditional data rationale and do something with it before actually having to go and do what we typically have to do, right? Clean it up, make sure
Well,
all things are mapped together, make sure that things are like, in all these different data models. So
well, Dave, I always find it really interesting because, like, when we say ERP, what is an ERP, right? I mean, it's layers of technology put together too, and we
yeah.
act like it's one system, right? But oftentimes you find out, there's a finance component, there's an operations component, there's a quality management component piece, right? So it's really multiple pieces of software put together. Now maybe you bought it from one vendor, or maybe you got to do something on the back end side, right, to kind of make it even more useful. But so you're out here, you're consulting with people, you're trying to get to insight. you know Dave, what are you doing to help people get there? Because I think that's really what people are, like you said, trying to get to, right? We want to run our businesses.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to, why do we even search for that new tool, right? There's nobody, that I know of in all the years that I've, whether it's been in consulting or, working for people, right? There's never been a kind of a non-driver. And what I mean by that is, like, we're always trying to do something, right? Like, that's the whole point. Even when we're looking for that silver bullet piece of technology, it's because we feel as though we're missing something. And that could be data related, could be, process flow related, or something else. So, in terms of how to help people get there, a lot of it comes down to kind of defining, right? Like, and this sounds very simple, and in a lot of cases it is, right? It's simple. It's just not easy, like, and the whole point though is to understand, what are the inputs that we have available? How can we control those? How are we feeding that into the system, right? And what are those outputs? What are we looking for to do with that? What insights are we trying to drive? Because a lot of times we could be measuring the wrong KPIs. If go back to that inventory example, right? If we're measuring, let's say, total inventory value and turn time, something that's pretty typical from a KPI standpoint, but we have no visibility over, you know, how many orders did this particular material land on? How many bill of materials did this one particular inventory SKU impact throughout the year?
Right.
What kind of percentage is that of our total orders? Is this
Is it
really
a profitable thing, right?
it, yeah,
Or
all,
should we be putting that material to something else, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All of those, and you could continue to go down that kind of rabbit hole, right? So it's
Right.
all of those pieces. It's really about helping people to understand, are we looking at the right things? How can we take what we've got available to us today and again, ultimately look for those ways to drive efficiency, reduce waste, right? Improve consistency from a quality perspective for our customers. All of those little pieces, bringing all of those touch points together in a meaningful way. That's the work that we're kind of doing on a daily basis.
Well, and I know a lot of people need help out there with this stuff because it isn't easy, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if you look at historically the data way you try to access data, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing?
The two biggest challenges are just pure data integrity and governance, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of take those things for granted. And again, like going back to the work that you guys are doing, I look at a tool like what you guys have developed and I say to myself, here's an opportunity to not go down the kind of traditional path of integrity and governance. That's not to say we don't need those things and we can't, benefit from them, especially as, our organizations grow. But what often is missing, right, is like it's such a big problem and it's the how do you eat an elephant, right? If I've got, let's talk about a larger company, right? Like let's talk about a company that grows through acquisition. Let's say we've got kind of let's go for like just a small one, right? Let's say we've got 20 to 25 facilities dotted all over the US or all over the world, right? That could be maybe 3 to 5 ERP environments, that could be, hundreds if
Multiple
not
finance systems,
yeah.
right?
Hundreds, if not thousands, of applications that run and touch all of that data, right? So when you talk to a company like that and start asking about, inventory management and, like I'll go back to my example, how many orders did this particular, line item impact and all of those things becomes very challenging to see that across an organization because often those are individual data sets. So, in order to pull that data, what would you have to do? You'd have to normalize it. What's that mean? You have to go and you have to map each one of those things. You have to make sure that if you've got let's say a material spelled out in one data set, but you've got that same material abbreviated in another data set, that somewhere you make the connection that hey, those are the two of the same things, right? And you think about that for hundreds of thousands of data points in these organizations, right?
I laugh because, coming out of the healthcare industry, all the same challenges, right?
Yeah.
Data governance, data normalization. You have patients traveling through the system. You have kind of your acute care hospitals, but then you're trying to transfer the patient to your rehab nursing centers, your post care facilities, and data is just it's not uniformed across the world. So we spend a lot of money, a lot of time and energy trying to normalize and govern that data. And so that being said, what does a company do, right? What are you seeing? Where are they working? Are they working outside of their systems? How are they managing this to overcome this problem, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, you end up throwing kind of a lot of manpower at it, right? So there's a lot of exports and, Excel and people try to pull it into, BI tools and, all types of other data visualization tools that are out there and in the marketplace today. But underneath all of that, you've got the same issue, right? So like, yes, you may be able to get at some insight today, but you're just continually recreating the same problem. So every day that goes by, you're generating more transactions with that same sort of data layer in place. If we talk about just general data governance, right? I see a lot of companies that, in an effort to not slow the system down, right? The organization as a system, in an effort to not slow that down, they'll do things like give people full access to their item master or to their branch master. And while you may try to make the argument that won't slow the system down, what you ultimately end up doing over the course of time is you create an environment that has duplicates. You create an environment that has a lot of dirty data, not just from a duplicate perspective, but from a transaction perspective, right? Like I walked through this example the other day for a client of ours, and I kind of said to him, in a lot of these environments, what you'll end up seeing is because of the process flows that are required, you will end up having customers set up as vendors as well. And so
Yeah.
what often happens, right, is because there's no communication, from that data, and sometimes Customer service will pull and write an order up for a vendor, but
I'm
it's not
never gonna
the
say
vendor.
that. That never happened, Dave. Never happened.
You know,
Totally. Yeah.
and
No.
then it's the series of, cleanup things, and, and in an environment as complex as an ERP, whether it's fully integrated or it's, desperate, then you've got all these other transactions that get kicked off that, IT then has to go in and try to, reconcile and clean up, right? So it's all these different things. It's kind of like the iceberg analogy, right? Like we only see
It
just a
is.
little bit above the surface of the water, and these environments are so complex, so many different data points and fields and tables and all of those things. That one little thing like that literally has this cascading effect underneath, that you cannot see. And that starts to compound, right? Every day, think all the transactions, the number of people, so on and so forth.
Dave, the image that always comes to my mind is the duck, right? It's like on the
Yeah,
surface,
same. Yeah,
it looks very simple, clean. The duck's just gliding across
calm
underneath
and
the
majestic.
water. There's nothing but chaos and feet pedaling, right?
Yeah,
And we're all scrambling, right? And
yeah,
so as we try to become data driven in our culture, right? Because data can help you, right? I mean,
yes.
do you have examples where like you've been able to unlock data for customers and really just transform the whole way they operate?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of countless times that tapping into those insights can move the needle, and move the needle, much faster than we could kind of do, uh, you know, anecdotally, if you will, right? Because oftentimes there's pieces of that anecdotal, kind of insights that are just missing.
Yeah.
So again, I go back to, what are we measuring? How are we looking at it? If we're not measuring and looking at the right things, we don't understand what's flowing into that data. We can be very easily misled.
So
Um,
this raises another thing. So, let's talk silver bullet for a second here, because I think a lot of the folks I talk to are really excited about AI and the potential of AI. And, what are you hearing in the marketplace around AI? Is this going to be our silver bullet?
well, people certainly think it is,
I
but
can at least get told at least 3 times a day it is.
yeah, again, I think there's a big wave of FOMO in the market today, right? Everybody thinks that their neighbor has already implemented AI in their business, and every, tech platform out there today talks about their AI features and benefits. And there's no doubt that there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with it. But at the heart of all of that, right, we still have a lot of these underlying issues that we need to understand and unpack, to be able to define what's the use case, what can we do with these, kind of new superpowers, and really, much more importantly, is like, how can we get at them in a structured way that gives us this kind of, standardized or centralized intelligence layer, without having to go and just replace, all of these different pieces. Because, if you take the traditional kind of software tech approach today, right? If you're talking to SAP is going to tell you, hey, we can do all of this if you bring all of your systems into SAP. If you're talking to Oracle's going to say the same thing. Dynamics is going to say the same thing.
I
Like,
won't say. Go ahead.
no, no, I'm just gonna, it's kind of the point, right? Like,
I, you
everybody wants
know,
you to,
I
yeah,
laugh
but
because, I had a conversation recently with a friend of mine, and, he's the CEO of a manufacturing company. And he's like, hey, listen, my ERP company's telling me they're going to solve all my problems, and they're going to bring in, and they got an AI strategy. And that's my AI strategy. And I'm like, okay, well, let's go back to all the other trap data that we're talking about. So you're going
yeah,
to bring in your Outlook data, right? You're from Microsoft Graph, and so you can look at what's happening from communication standpoint. You're going to take all your marketing data now, and you're going to bring that into the. How does this all work, right? And so yeah, no, listen, I think, for business leaders out there, there's a lot of I couldn't agree more. The FOMA is real, right? The potentials for AI is massive, but
Yeah.
having a real strategy, a real approach, I think people have to take a step back and really start to think about, what are they doing, where are they doing it, how do you bring in, that human element, like, of what, how you operate, right? Because, are you going to trust that over to the company that's building the large language model behind it, or like, these things are a little bit of a black box, and for me
Yeah.
that's a little scary, right? Because will it get what I really do?
Yeah.
Maybe, right? So, well, yeah, no doubt AI is a topic. No doubt AI there's FOMA around it. So, you're out there talking. So, what are you advising your customers when it comes to AI?
Yeah, I mean, back to your point, right? We've got to really take a step back to be able to take a step forward, and it's not about the kind of simplicity of the tool. It's about understanding, what are we really trying to do here, and how does that fit into our kind of overall strategy, right?
Yeah,
And it's going to be different for every company, because some companies don't have an acquisition strategy. Some companies have an acquisition strategy and want to be centralized. Some of them have an strategy and want to be decentralized. So it's really about understanding, where do you see yourself, how do you see yourself strategically growing in the next handful of years. What does your tech stack look like today? How process mature and tech mature are we today? And taking a real look at that, right? There's a huge difference, a huge leap forward in saying, like, these are the things that we want to implement and integrate, when we've not done a great job of change management traditionally with the tool set that we've got, right? So we have to put all of those things together in a meaningful way before we can start to take a look at, okay, now that we know this, right, what tools are available to us? Okay. And so often we start in the other direction. So often we get excited about the shiny object and this thing that's out there, and, oh man, I just heard, did you see what, this XYZ platform is doing? And we get so enamored by that we forget, again, the planning, the people, the process. And we
yeah.
jump in, kind of in full excitement, and start to roll these things out to a lackluster, a lackluster crowd.
Well, and I don't know if you saw this IBM survey that was recently put out about there is no one silver bullet to any of this, right?
Yeah.
They are saying, even with AI, there's not one large language model that's going to encompass everything. AI, from the standpoint of being deployed is one thing, but ML, right? That predictive state, that, like, projection forward, the projection backwards, that's not really the role of AI either,
Yeah.
right? But we still need these tools. We need different tools in our toolbox to kind of
Yep.
run our businesses, right? And so, well, Dave, I know you've been out there talking to a lot of people. With your consulting, what is a typical, like, how do you approach the subject of, like, the starting point of coming up with that strategy? What's your approach?
Yeah, I mean, generally, it kind of starts with some sort of a fixed fee discovery process, to really unpack all of this, right? It's about, where are we at today? Where are we trying to go? What does that roadmap kind of look like? And again, it's really understanding, how do we bring together, right? Planning, people, process, technology. How do we bring those things together in a meaningful way? What are we doing? Kind of, where are we at today from a maturity standpoint, and what is that direction that we're trying to go with it. So again, I'll go back to, a couple of examples and things that we're talking about. um if you've got a company that is, let's say, a decentralized company that's looking to grow through acquisition, how can we leverage the tool set that you've got existing today, and maybe look for some tools that will help offset that, right? And what I mean by that is, again, if you're in that environment and you talk to a company like Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, they're going to say, hey, let's get all of these facilities onto our platform that will, centralize your data layer, that will allow you all of these different insights. And then, oh, by the way, you could take advantage of, all of our AI capabilities, right?
Yep.
And at the heart of something like that is really, as an acquisition happens and as that integration happens, right? You kind of have two choices. You get them on that platform, you keep the separate platforms, and you do a lot of import export, right?
Yep.
And you do that for operations, for finance, for C suite, right?
Yep.
So, or right, you take a look at, are there some tools available to that would allow us to tap into those data sets in a meaningful way to bring the data together without having to go through all of that kind of change management piece, and gives you the flexibility now to have, operations, finance, strategy, kind of at your fingertips, right? So that's just one example, but it always starts with unpacking where are we at today, what are we trying to do in terms of, how we're growing this business, what's on the horizon for that, what does that look like, because all of those things are going to impact, kind of the direction forward, right? Again, how do we unlock the planning people process using the technology, and whether or not that makes a case for replacing and or upgrading, that's a whole nother conversation. There's often just a plethora of things we can do, to move the needle from a profitability, cash flow, and culture standpoint, well before we start talking about, replacing technology or upgrading technology.
So, Dave, that makes me think, in your opinion, where does cloud fit in with all this, right? Because again, you can put and store data in many places.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just another thing to confuse everybody, right? Like that's the I'm a really simple person, and companies have used cloud as, some marketing um messages, which I'm not a huge fan of. And when you break all of that down, whether or not you're talking about something that stays in the cloud, or is, a SaaS solution, or something that is on prem. Again, it all comes down to what are we trying to do, and how do we need to do it, right, to kind of best serve the needs of ultimately our team and our customers.
Mm.
And I'll give you one example. This was years ago. There was a cloud solution that was implemented, and for very specific reasons, one of the considerations that probably wasn't given enough weight to it is the fact that, when that goes down, everybody's now down,
Right.
and
Right.
so it's the same thing with, with the ability to kind of integrate. Everybody says, oh, we have an API for that, we can integrate. One thing that people don't talk about in that same sentence is, well, you can, as long as that company opens up the ability to connect to those objects, right? And
Right.
if those
Well,
objects aren't available within their API, guess what? You can't connect to it.
I was just gonna say, I can't tell you how many times I've walked in and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, you should be able to." "Oh, hold on a second.
Yeah,
They
you
don't
know?
make that available. That's not exposed."
Exactly,
Yeah, so,
exactly. And again, it
yeah.
goes back to that backwards thought process where we're looking at the tools, we're looking at the technology. And again, like the back to the cloud for just a second though, Bill, like, and it touches on the AI and the ML and, the RPA, and there's so many, kind of words and terms and acronyms being thrown out there that it's easy to get confused about what are we really talking about, is same goes in the ERP world, or any kind of, platform space too. So we have to be really mindful about, you and I could be saying the same, acronym and be talking about two
Totally
completely
different
different things.
things.
Right.
Well, and Dave, when you bring it back to the business focus, really, right? what are the two things that any CEO really cares about, right? I mean, they care about their people, they care about a lot of things, but like running a business, it's revenue and expenses, right?
Yep.
It's really like, are we growing? Do we need to cut cost? How do we make net profit, right? Because
Yeah.
businesses are in the business of making money, and offering their services is the way, or giving their product is the way. But those two levers, ultimately everything kind of comes back to that,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so, I've always loved the fact that you keep it real out there, that you keep it simple, that we stay true to the tenets of business, right? Let's find ways for people process to work so that we can deliver our services and our
Yeah.
products, right? I find cloud interesting. So let's pull on that thread a little bit, though, with data. Where is it being stored? Because recently I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he was working with a friend, and he's going through his business, and a lot of their data isn't in the cloud. It was actually stored on prem, and they have a lot of event information, a lot of things that they were capturing, but were they using it? That was the question mark. So,
Yeah.
you, you know, how do you make the data usable? I think has to be something we talk about in business. And so, when it comes to making data usable, what are you talking to your customers about?
Yeah, I mean, it gets back to the kind of the use case scenario that we keep going back to, right? Just because we have the ability to collect the data doesn't necessarily mean we should, or that we need to. So if there's no kind of use case, I'll use your example right back at you, right? But if there's no real use case in terms of collecting that data, and no way that we can leverage that for future decision making ability, whether that is from a strategic perspective internally, or something external and client facing, then why are we storing it? Right? Because at the end of the day, we're paying to store it, we're paying to keep it secure, we're paying, to maintain all of these things. So again, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And some of that you learn through time. You learn through, hey, maybe our initial plan wasn't to grow through acquisition. Now all of a sudden we find ourselves in a scenario where we've got the ability to do that. Boy, this information would sure be nice to be able to tap into. So it's things like that. But again, for me, that's never the starting point. That's like the kind of toppings on the sundae, right? Like, I'm a back to basics. Let's unpack where we're at. Let's understand where we're trying to go, in terms of growing strategically, and what are the levers to pull to be able to do that. And again, back to your point, right? Like, often it is tapping into data to understand what are our most profitable products. What would happen from a revenue perspective if we increased prices by 10%, right? What kind of churn would we expect to see from a decision like that, right? Like, you
Right.
need data to be able to do any of those types of models and forecasting to understand, what's the anticipated impact, and then as you start to roll out these changes, you need the ability to measure.
See it
Uh,
and watch it and monitor it, right? Because if
yeah,
you're going off the rails,
absolutely.
what are you going to do, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Because again, to that point, right? Back to the whole backwards approach, right? A lot of times it's kind of the, hey, let's make the decision and we'll react. I'm all for breaking a few eggs right along the way. That's okay. But sometimes we can't drop the whole carton. Okay.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
like
Nobody wants to go home with no eggs, especially when you got the cake to bake.
exactly. Exactly. you
Hey,
know
well, hey, listen, Dave, you got so much knowledge. You've been out there helping so many people unwind how to make their businesses better. Do you have any practical tips? When it comes to technology, data management, focusing in on how to make their businesses better. Because I think, again, your messages that you and I talk about, they're just so powerful, and I want to make sure that people get to hear some of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I mean, Yeah, for me, it really comes down to, again, getting a hold of the basics, and I always go back to the planning, people, process, technology, and I always talk about it in that order. For me, that's your business system, right? And we can apply that to your organization as a business system. We can start to narrow that down, and we can talk about specific, process flows and/or technology pieces within your business, whether that's, your financial system or your enterprise management system or your operations system. Right. But it's always getting back down to that and understanding what are the levers that we need to pull in order to move ourselves forward. The thing I see probably more often than anything is that we look at kind of efficiency or waste. We look at these things like in a vacuum or in a silo. And so often we start and we think like, hey, if we could just get, this freed up, then all the rest of the kind of dominoes would fall. And the reality of it is that everything is so interconnected within our businesses that it's not as simple as just saying, boy, if I could just do this one thing, because it's that thing that impacts this next thing that impacts this next thing. And
Yeah.
so, from a tactical perspective, right? I love seeing these things on paper. I love to understand how they're interconnected because that helps to prioritize and to see how, well, if we pull a lever here, what's going to be the impact over here? And then what are we going to have to prepare ourselves for, as this starts to transition from one to the other? And for me, again, I'm a really simple person. So I like to see those things visually. And, again, tool set doesn't matter, right? Big whiteboard, bunch of
Yeah.
sticky notes,
Well, yeah, I think you touch
whatever.
on something that I think we are trying to very much promote. Instead of saying people, process, and technology, I'm really honing in and saying, what's your process? Then what is your technology? And then how do we enable your people so they can do what they need to do to make the improvements, right? And so, I'm trying to get out there and flip the script a little bit. And I think again, if we start diving deeper into our processes, understand how our data is connected, we will be able to really transform the way our people work inside of businesses, right? Really drive that data driven culture, really start to open up optionality so we can see the whole or see what's missing. Or, we kind of keep talking internally here at Simonics about the haves, the have nots of data, right? Then we talk a little bit about the known knowns and how most people are just struggling to get to the known knowns, right? And how they access that information. And a lot of that's because the layers of technology, right? And
Yeah.
then it's like, well, you have these known unknowns, right? We just know they exist, and
Yep.
we can see that. And then it's really kind of like that, you know unknown knowns and unknown unknowns. And then it's really those ones that really scare us, the unknown unknowns, right, of our business. And how do we start to build the layers in from a technology point so that we can start to see that holistically a little bit better, make it true to what we're doing. But diving into your processes and finding what you have is a pretty good starting point.
It's really the best starting point,
uh,
because again, people are doing this stuff. The thing about it is, especially the higher up in the organization we get, or the larger the organization. So you've got multiple layers in there, obviously. But when you get down to the ground floor and you see some of the stuff that people are doing to kind of, not just unpack what you just unpacked, right? But to kind of just do their day in, day out, whether it's as an individual, for their team, for their department, whatever it happens to be. People are doing this stuff and they're taking a really long time to be able to do it. So again, without understanding what are those process flows, how are people tapping into that today? And then again, making this stuff available, right? A lot of companies don't even have a strategy in place to kind of open up some of this data to people that are kind of getting at it one way or another, right? People are crafty. And that's not to say that people are misappropriating it. So don't take it that way. It's the
no,
fact
I mean,
that there's abilities to tap into this information, whether it's through an export in your ERP, and then you pull it out and you're manipulating it manually through.
Oh,
People are
Dave, I
doing
was
this
just gonna
stuff at that
I was
point.
just gonna say there are some really amazing Excel wizards out there.
Yeah,
And I would
100%.
say that, the people I encounter, most people are operating out of PowerPoint and Excel, right? They're trying to drive their business outside of the technology infrastructure. The technology infrastructure is capturing a lot of the data, but to actually make the decisions, they're
Yeah,
doing the work somewhere else. And we what I'm most excited about is with AI is really this opportunity to right that wrong, right? How do you build in these modeling layers? How do you build the reflection of your business? How do you start to get to the truth and what things look like? And then how do you give access to, the your team so they can make better informed decisions to improve your business. And what, Dave, I always found funny is that we all use different data for different reasons. So your CEO might be looking at the same data with you that you might be looking at as somebody down at an operational level, but that data has different contextual meaning for that
yeah.
person, right? And I also find it very difficult, the higher up you, the more strategic the initiative, just how much data you really have to connect to start to move that needle. And well, listen, Dave, this has been fascinating. I'm sure we could go on for hours and hours, but we'll probably have to do a couple more of
Part
these to
two.
get all of the stuff out of you here. But now it's like I learned this from a buddy of mine, Zach. He has this segment in his podcast that he does, where he asks the guest who should be the next guest on the interview. And I know
Oh,
you got so many people in your network. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Zach,
yeah.
this is a true shout out because I loved it. So I'll give you a second to think about
Yeah, I
who
got you really got me on the spot. I mean, there are so
yeah,
many
and I
people
didn't even give
that
you any
kind of.
warning. I
Yeah,
really
man, you
sandbagged you on this one.
I love that. I might even have to get back to you on this. Like, I feel so overwhelmed with choice right now.
Oh, all
There's so
right.
many people. Yeah,
I'll
let
let
me
you off the hook, but you got to email me on
I will
who you got to.
I promise I will email you, I will email you somebody. Yeah, there's so many great people, for
Yeah.
you to talk to.
Well, I think about like Sam and others in our group, right? That we all get
But
together.
those are all givens,
I
those are all
know.
givens.
I was expecting to give an easy layup one, right?
See, I
No.
don't I can't just take the layup, Bill.
Okay.
I
Well, I
gotta
like
put
you.
work into it.
Well, Dave, you never shied away from the hard work. That's what makes you awesome. Keep out there fighting the good fight with your client base. How can people get a hold of you, Dave?
Yeah, I'm super active on LinkedIn. You can find me there. You can find me at our website. So always up for a conversation. No, never any requirements to work beyond that. But always up for a conversation and get to know people and see how I can help. So thanks, Bill.
Well, hey, listen, thanks for coming on today. This is our second attempt. We'll get better, I promise, with this. Maybe I've learned my lesson. Don't sandbag the guest.
Yeah, I okay, so I thought like there's many people, right? But there's somebody recently that I talked to. This just came to my mind. There's somebody recently that I talked to that I've known for a while, and he's doing really big things in the HR space. Guy's name is Pete Schramm. And I encouraged him to reach out to you just the other day. So that'll be my nomination for a future episode for you.
All right, Pete,
Pete,
you heard it
yep,
here from Dave Chrysler, right? I'm going to be contacting you, or you got to contact me. So you're the next guest up, and we'll get you in the pipeline. So, no,
love it.
hey, Dave, this is a real pleasure, real treat. Like I said, I always enjoy our conversations. And, for everybody out there, thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate you. And hey, if you were worried about data management, if you're worried about what is your enterprise AI strategy, reach out to us at Simonics. We're working with folks like Dave and others, and we're trying to help people improve their businesses and really drive change in an industry. We want you to be part of our data revolution. We really believe that we can change the future through technology, but technology shouldn't be the leader, as a theme here in our conversation today. So Dave, thank you for joining so much.
Thanks, Bill.